At first, the question seems almost silly, the kind of thing asked idly when nothing important is left to say. A small, comical gesture, a flick of the hand, teeth grazing the edges of skin, a moment of boredom or nervousness. Something children do before they learn better. Something adults hide when they know they should. But behind this apparently trivial question lies a much deeper one. What is our body trying to tell us when we cannot find words? For millions of people around the world, nail biting is a daily ritual. It happens without thought, almost without choice. The fingers move to the mouth as if pulled by invisible strings. The sharp edge of a tooth against keratin brings a brief sensation of relief. The tension drops, only to rise again moments later. And then the cycle repeats. On the surface, it is a habit, one of many that human beings develop to soothe themselves. Yet if we look more carefully, we begin to see that nail biting is not just about nails. It is a small doorway into the architecture of the psyche, a message from the unconscious disguised as an ordinary movement. The habit we don't talk about. Psychiatrists have given it a name, onychophagia. It belongs to a family of behaviors known as body-focused repetitive actions, alongside hair pulling, skin picking, lip chewing, behaviors that cause harm to the very body they inhabit. Surveys suggest that as many as a third of adolescents and a fifth of adults engage in regular nail biting. It often begins in childhood, intensifies during adolescence, and for many never truly disappears. It is secretive, performed under desks, in cars, at night, during conversations where attention drifts. For some, it leaves only mild embarrassment. For others, bleeding cuticles, damaged enamel, chronic shame. On a neurological level, researchers describe how the act briefly activates the brain's reward system. Stress produces an inner pressure. The bite provides a release. A fraction of a second of dopamine calms the nervous system. But the calm never lasts. Guilt often follows, sometimes pain. Always the sense of being caught in a loop. What seems at first like a small relief becomes a paradox. The very action meant to soothe us injures us instead. The symbol beneath the surface. Yet the human body is rarely random. Every gesture, however unconscious, carries echoes of meaning. Nails are not meaningless parts of us. They are ancient tools, extensions of survival, weapons of protection, boundaries between the vulnerable flesh and the outer world. To bite them, to erode them, is to gnaw away at our own defenses. It is as if the unconscious is sending a quiet signal. You are not safe, you are not strong enough, you are unprepared. The act becomes symbolic self-sabotage, a way of undermining our own armor. In this sense, nail biting is less about nervousness and more about a silent dialogue between strength and vulnerability. A gesture through which insecurity leaks into the physical world. The body as a voice of the soul. Modern psychology often explains such habits as somatization, when emotions too uncomfortable to face with words find their outlet through the body. Anger we cannot admit to. Sadness we do not allow. Anxiety that feels unspeakable. All of it searches for release. And if consciousness refuses, the unconscious will find another way. The hand rises, the teeth meet the nail, and in that moment, the body says what the voice cannot. Something within me is unsettled. This is why nail biting is not just bad behavior. It is a form of communication between the visible and the invisible, the conscious and the unconscious, the mind and the body. Shadows on the wall. Philosophy offers its own metaphors. Imagine Plato's cave. Prisoners chained, watching shadows flicker across the wall, mistaking illusion for reality. Nail-biting can be seen as a modern cave ritual. We sense the shadow of our fear, but instead of turning to face it, we try to stifle it. We consume it, piece by piece. We chew away at the edges of our unease. But the shadows remain, growing larger the longer we refuse to turn toward the light. In this way, the gesture is not meaningless at all. It is a ritual of avoidance, a physical confirmation that we are still in the cave, still chained, still afraid to see what lies behind us. The medical cost of silence. The consequences extend beyond symbolism. Medicine reminds us that nails serve practical purposes. They protect fingertips, anchor grip, signal health. When damaged, the skin becomes more vulnerable to infection. Tiny wounds around the cuticle become gateways for bacteria. The enamel of teeth chips, the jaw strains, even digestion may be affected by swallowed fragments of keratin. The body quietly pays the price of what the mind refuses to face. Psychologically, the cost is even greater. Each bite reinforces the cycle: stress, compulsion, relief, shame, renewed stress. Over time, the nervous system learns this pattern as the default coping mechanism. Instead of processing emotions, we chew them away. Instead of confronting the storm, we scratch at its edges. The shadows return. Depth psychology tells us that the unconscious never disappears. What we repress returns. If not in dreams, then in habits. If not in words, then in symptoms. Nail biting is one such return. It is the shadow knocking at the door. A fragment of ourselves that says, "I will not be silenced. I will make myself known, even if only as a small wound on your hand." The bite becomes a form of remembering what we would rather forget. The weight of society. But to understand this habit fully, we must also look outward, for we do not live in isolation. We live in cultures that reward control, perfection, performance. In such a world, there is little space for imperfection, little room for pauses, little tolerance for weakness. The mask is valued more than the truth. And so the unconscious rebels. It chooses a hidden gesture, something private, something almost invisible, a small act of self-harm that whispers, "I am not as perfect as I seem." Nail biting, in this sense, is not just personal, it is cultural. It is the body's protest against a society that has no patience for imperfection. The logic of perfectionism. Many nail biters describe how the act begins with the sight of a small flaw, a jagged edge, a tiny imperfection. The urge to fix it grows overwhelming, and soon the nail is gone entirely. This too is symbolic. It reveals the deeper logic of perfectionism, the inability to live with flaws, however small, the belief that imperfection must be erased even if erasing destroys more than it preserves. And so the hand becomes a battlefield between flaw and perfectness, between acceptance and compulsion. The philosophy of weakness. It is easy to dismiss nail biting as weakness, a lack of discipline, a childish inability to control oneself. But weakness has another face. Weakness is also opportunity, a chance to see where our inner battle is taking place, a signal of where transformation could begin. For what is strength, if not the ability to face what frightens us? And what is growth, if not the capacity to turn even the smallest symptom into a path toward self-understanding? Anxiety and the dizziness of freedom. Some philosophers described anxiety as the dizziness that comes with freedom, the overwhelming awareness that we can choose, that we are responsible,
that life is not fixed, but open. In the face of such vastness, it is no surprise that we seek small escapes. Nail biting becomes one of them, a ritual of control in the face of infinite possibility, an attempt to reduce cosmic uncertainty into a tiny, manageable act. But the infinite does not vanish. Anxiety remains, circling back until we dare to face it. Individuation, the journey to wholeness. Depth psychology reminds us that the ultimate task of human development is individuation, the process of becoming whole, to reconcile the conscious and the unconscious, to bring the shadow into the light, to align the mask with the truth.
Habits like nail biting signal where this process is incomplete. They reveal the parts of us we have not yet accepted. They are small invitations to continue the journey. Every time the teeth meet the nail, we are reminded something within you is still waiting to be integrated. The collective shadow. But what happens individually also happens collectively. A society that represses emotion breeds individuals who repress theirs. A culture that worships masks produces bodies that must speak in secret. Nail biting then can be read as a symptom of the age, a quiet rebellion against the civilization that has forgotten how to pause, how to feel, how to acknowledge imperfection. In each small wound, the larger wound of our times is revealed, from symptom to symbol. The question then becomes, how do we respond? The traditional methods are physical: gloves, bitter polishes, behavioral tricks. They may interrupt the act, but they rarely address the need behind it. The deeper task is to transform the symptom into a symbol, to see nail biting not as an enemy, but as a messenger, to ask, what emotion is trying to surface here? What part of me have I silenced? What shadow seeks acknowledgement? When we listen, the habit begins to loosen its grip. The unconscious no longer needs to scream through the body once it is heard by the mind. And perhaps in the end, this is why the question, why do you bite your nails, matters so much. Because it is never just about nails. It is about how human beings cope with fear, with freedom, with imperfection, about how we live with shadows and how we avoid the light, about how we injure ourselves not out of malice, but out of unacknowledged need. The habit is a microcosm of the human condition, always seeking relief, always dancing with anxiety, always torn between repression and expression. Closing reflection. So, the next time you notice yourself biting your nails or see someone else doing it, pause for a moment. Look past the surface. Ask not just why this habit, but what is the body trying to say? Perhaps it is pointing to sadness never spoken, perhaps to anxiety never faced, perhaps to a longing for safety in a world that feels too harsh. If we learn to see it this way, the act transforms. It becomes less of a shameful flaw and more of a clue, a reminder that even the smallest gestures carry the weight of our inner lives. And maybe then the question shifts once more. It is no longer, why do you bite your nails, but something far more serious. Why do you keep biting yourself? Nails can grow back, but the wounds in the soul wait for us to notice, to stop biting them away, and instead, finally, to begin to heal.